welcome to Health Exposure, and I'm Kurt Hill, your host. Tonight is an interesting show. We have a show on hyper and hypoglycemia and diabetes, so this ought to prove to be very, very interesting. And as usual, my favorite guest, Deborah Arneson, is here, who will give us a plethora of data on all three of these topics. So let's just zoom right in and talk to her. Hiya.
Hiya, how you doing, Kurt? Nice to see you again.
Good. Welcome back. You look very nice. My goodness.
Thanks. Thank you.
Now, tell us a little bit about what hypoglycemia is.
There you have it, folks. Perfect.
You mean I know one finally?
Yes. Hypo is basically low blood sugar, and hypoglycemia is characterized by fatigue, feeling, or drops during the day. So you eat and you fall asleep afterwards or become very sleepy. Some people with hypoglycemia get really nasty when their blood sugar drops. They're like, wow, I mean, I have a girlfriend who literally her face changes. I think you know her actually. She's one of your clients. We won't say any names here, but she gets like gnarly and her face becomes twisted and distorted. And I'm like, oh my goodness, watch The Exorcist. And we know it's time to feed her. And as soon as she eats again, she is completely back to normal, sweet as pie. It's hysterical.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Now this is hyper or hypo?
Hypo.
Hypo, okay.
So that's low. Hypo is low and hyper is high.
Okay.
So when people have hypo blood sugar, they get pretty nasty sometimes, pretty snarly. Not nice to be around. They're rude. Some people get shaky. Some people feel nauseous. Some people get headaches. So that's hypo.
Interesting. Okay, obviously the next question is hyper. Which is up, which is high.
Right. Well, you develop hyperglycemia by staying in a hypo condition for a very long period of time. So when you look at someone's blood test, you can deduce that, or really you can tell by symptoms. So if someone's hypo for 10 or 15 years, they will generally then run into hyperglycemia, and that just means that the pancreas can no longer take it. It's had it. It cannot control the amount of insulin. It cannot regulate the insulin that it produces. And it tends to go into hyper, and then after hyper we go into diabetes. So
which is?
Diabetes is a big problem. Okay, diabetes, there are two types of diabetes. There's insipidus and mellitus. And insipidus is a metabolic disorder, has a lot to do with vasopressin and the ability for the kidneys to handle it or utilize it well. And then mellitus is basically brought on by poor diet and can be controlled by changing your diet. So if somebody develops diabetes or is hyperglycemic, they can actually control it by regulating what they eat and what they put into their body and eating small meals throughout the day and avoiding refined carbohydrates. Like our pastas and too much breads and our sugars and coffee with sugar in it and da-da-da-da-da-da. So. That's what it is.
How does one measure hypo, hyper, or even diabetes?
Well, to do an exact measurement, you would need to do a blood test, Kurt. That is a relationship between your glucose levels and how your body is handling, your blood sugar. So a normal range, I think you're going to ask me that anyway, but a normal range is between...
Have we been doing too many shows? You absolutely know.
I'm anticipating between 90 and 99. So you like to be in the mid-90s. That's ideal. So when someone's hypo, they'll be down below 70. When I see people driving down into the 80s, it's like a flag to me.
I see.
So I'm not happy with 80-something. I'm not happy with 70-something. And when you're down in the 40s, you're extraordinarily hypo, and you're right at that border where you're going to jump into hyper. That takes a little bit of time, but you'll get there. And then after you're hyper and you start creeping up into the hundreds, 110, 115, 125, then you're borderline diabetic.
Oh, I see. Deborah, you hear a lot about glucose, but what does glucose do in the body, and where does it come from?
Oh, that's a good question. Glucose is basically the body's way of measuring your blood sugar, or how much sugar is circulating in the body. When you consume a food, the body will convert whatever food you're eating into a sugar to create energy, so it changes it into glucose. The insulin then streams into the bloodstream from the pancreas in an effort to bring your glucose or blood sugar down into a normal range again. And it drives that glucose and changes it into glycogen then and drags it into the liver or into the muscle for future storage or energy. And it will be stored in the liver or the muscle, especially like a lot of pasta or something, for up to 12 hours. And then it gets converted into fat if you don't use it.
I see.
So a lot of your lipid metabolism and regulation, like high cholesterol, which we discussed last week, has a great deal to do with regulating insulin as well. So if you can't regulate your insulin, and you do that by fueling the body with the right foods at the right times. You don't go long periods of time without eating. A lot of people will have no breakfast. They haven't eaten since 7 or 8 o'clock the night before, and then they turn around at 2 in the afternoon, which is 18 hours. They've gone without food. They've been in a hypo, state where the body has been receiving no energy, no fuel. The body's like, please give me some food. And then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're so hungry, you will eat literally anything you can get your hands on. So if it's like not moving, it's yours, It doesn't matter what it is.
I've seen this from clients that come in to see me. They're ravenous and they can't get enough food when they do eat. And you sit there and you look at it and you say, my goodness, what is this?
Where you're putting all this.
Exactly. That's incredible.
Well, that means that their body is actually quite hypoglycemic, and it takes a while for the body to realize it's so low that you're eating, and that mechanism that tells you you're full isn't turned on because insulin has been shut down.
Oh, I see.
Now all of a sudden your body goes, you eat and eat and eat, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, why did I eat all that?
Oh my goodness.
Now I'm really full. Well, that's because the insulin is kicking in and your blood sugar is beginning to rise dramatically, especially if you've done a high carbohydrate or you eat 2 candy bars or something, or a cup of coffee and a donut. Your insulin levels will then begin to rise dramatically and you become hyper. Now, always when you eat, your blood sugar rises. It's supposed to. That means you're feeling good. You're getting some energy from your food. It makes your brain feel perkier. But if it rises too high, it can give you sometimes the same symptoms as hypo, which is the headache, the nauseousness, the fatigue or the sleepiness. It's very taxing on the endocrine system and the adrenal glands and the heart and the brain to have hypo or hyper for any length of time.
So to prevent hypoglycemia, you simply eat a balanced diet and make sure that you eat on a regular basis as opposed to these great gaps.
Yes, these gorges.
Gorges,
We want to do grazing, not gorging. So, grazing is basically eating throughout the day in regulated doses. I tell people it's much like feeding your body like it's a baby. You don't feed a baby, like once a day. The baby would be screaming its head off, and your body is literally screaming its little head off, but it can't get your attention, so it tries to do it by giving you a headache or making you crabby or nauseous. Unfortunately, people around you pay more than you do.
I see.
Until eventually you do become problematic with hyperglycemia or diabetes.
Is there a normal glucose level?
Yes, there is. The normal glucose level is somewhere around 95 is ideal. So if you're, again, looking at a glucose level of 40, when you measure your blood sugar, you could do a glucose tolerance test too, and many people do. They'll go and say, well, I think I'm hypoglycemic. Let's do a glucose tolerance test. You drink the sugar, thick, viscous kind of base, concentrated base. Disgusting tasting from what I've heard. I went with a girlfriend of mine, I stuck my finger and I was like, bah! And what it does is it's basically putting sugar into the system and watching how your body handles insulin, how much insulin it produces when sugar is present. And you have to drink it every 2 hours. And it takes 8 hours to run the test. So it's really important, and some people look like they're fine when they do a glucose tolerance test. But what really can make that tolerance for glucose or your blood sugar vary, your insulin reactions vary, is, for instance, I have a friend who drinks too much, in my opinion, and he will drink enormous amounts of alcohol at night. And what happens during the course of the night, if you drink a lot of alcohol, because it converts readily into sugar in the liver, your blood sugar goes way up when you're drinking, and then while you're sleeping it goes way down. Okay, now all of a sudden there's nothing there. It's not like there's any protein or any oil or fiber to help stabilize the production of insulin. So it goes way up, it drops way down, and he literally has gone into convulsions in the middle of the night 3 times.
Oh my goodness.
And they've taken his blood sugar and it's been down around 20 or 30. And you can die from that. I mean, you go into a convulsion, they can't bring your blood sugar back up, you're dead meat. You're gone. So basically now we have him trained that he cannot drink without a full meal.
I see.
And that has helped.
Fascinating.
That's helped a lot.
Fascinating. I didn't realize that. Once a person is hypoglycemic, can it be reversed?
Well, that's a good question too, Kurt. Not typically. Most people don't have the due diligence and respect for their body to change that. I'll cite another case because I really like these cases, but there was a young girl who came in who had been anorexic in her teens, and then she was bulimic when she was in her early 20s. And when she came to me, I'd say she was approximately 24 years old. extremely hypoglycemic. Her glucose level was 40. We know 40 is like significantly low. She had been to every doctor. She was kind of pudgy, and when you see that kind of fat that doesn't come off, you know that generally people can't regulate insulin, because excessive amounts of insulin in the body stores what? Fat.
I see.
When you see someone who's diabetic, you generally see that somebody who's really thin or really pudgy, and pudgy seems to be more of the norm. So she had been, you know, gotten down to like 100 pounds or 80 pounds, or I can't remember. She was really skinny, and now she was about 140. And could not take off that last 15 pounds. You know, she drove her bike everywhere. She came into my office, she had like a 40-pound backpack on her back. She had her changes of clothing and all her food for the whole day, and I had her eating every hour on the hour initially. And she did it. She was a college kid. She did it. She ate every hour on the hour. We wrote notes to her employer, so, you know, showing that she had to eat. And after the course of a year, she was able to turn her insulin regulation and her glucose values around. She went from 40 up to about 65, and then we tested after another year, and she was back up into about the 80s, and then at 14 months she was up into the 90s, and she stabilized there. But that's not the norm, because most people aren't willing to do that. And then after she stabilized it, she got to eat 3 to 4 times a day like a normal person.
You know, it's amazing when you say that. I don't mean to be naive, but when you know the dangers of something like diabetes and how terrible it can be, and you can't lead in some cases a normal life unless you have medication, you'd think that people would do anything to get healthy again, but I guess not. So,
well, I think a lot of people really expect a lot out of their bodies, you know, especially here in America. We are the king and queens of quick fixes, you know, and we're the king and queens of convenience, and we want everything just to be like boom, 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 without any thought really of what we're doing to our systems. And your body is miraculous. It will do amazing things if you give it half of what it needs. You don't have to even be perfect. You know, I tell people all the time, if you're good to your body 5 days a week, you can blow yourself out of the water 2 days a week. Your body will regulate itself. It'll handle the crises as long as you're really consistent those Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday days. And you're finding that more and more people are developing hypoglycemia and hypothyroid and chronic fatigue and tiredness, constipation, because they don't eat right. It's so simple, it's silly. You know, to fix it is so simple, but it means that you have to take a little bit of time to plan your life and take care of yourself. You can't go, you know, 9 hours without eating and expect your body to perform. You cannot be skipping breakfast. Your mom told you it was the most important meal of the day. So did mine. I never understood why until I got into nutrition. You are fasting all night long. You eat 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock. You go to bed. You don't eat again until you get up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, you're expecting your machine, your engine, your car to perform, right? Your body is your vehicle. And if you don't put gas in your tank, it will not perform optimally. Now, a lot of people are putting gas in their tank, but they're putting the worst kind of gas in their tank. They're putting in, like, not high octane, but the stuff that's loaded with lead, you know, that just isn't worth anything really to speak of. So if you put in coffee in a bagel, what you're going to get out of your body is the coffee and the bagel, which is basically high blood sugar, low blood sugar. You know, you're going to do this rise and fall. But if you give your body a nice protein meal at breakfast and some oil, and give your body a good, and you know, like a good rev up, a good start, it will perform for you for at least 4 to 5 hours until you really have to eat again. But if you skip breakfast, you're in deep trouble if you're hypo, hyper, or diabetic.
I see.
You cannot.
And I heard you say protein starting the day off. And
right.
I know a lot of people, a lot of my clients come in and they talk about cereal,
right.
and that's it, or a piece of fruit, and they think just because they put something in their stomach that has helped them. But let me segue
right.
quickly into, if you can reverse, of course it's not the norm, hyperglycemia through diet. Can you do the same with diabetes?
Yes, you can. Now, it depends on whether or not you're insulin dependent. If you become insulin dependent, then you've really let your body go a long ways here. And, you know, the poor body's in a total crisis every day of your life then. I do, however, have a really interesting girl, and I think we'll probably have her on the cable show here in the future. She's 22 years old, and her blood sugar will spike up to like 400. And she ended up in the hospital last year. That's how she came to me. She couldn't control her she's on insulin, and she couldn't even control her insulin with insulin. So she was all over the place, and she ended up, having a convulsion, going to the hospital. And she came to me, and we started, and she does a home prick test. She has a little kit where she can, test her blood sugar level. And I found that after her breakfast in the morning, her blood sugar was jumping up to about 280 to 300. And her breakfast was literally, she was doing some eggs or egg whites, and she would do 2 slices of rye toast with it. And she'd put some nut butter on the rye toast, which is high fat, a little bit of protein, but still it would jump up. We took out the rye toast, and her blood sugar stayed stable at 120. So you have to, kind of be a super sleuth or a Sherlock Holmes and go, okay, well, on the glycemic index, and this is an index that has been created for people who are hyper, hypo, or diabetic. The glycemic index relationship of foods means that a food on a scale of 0 to 100 has so many grams of sugar. So you're talking like 100%, 50%, 0%. Fruits and vegetables and high fiber foods and proteins and fats are down in the 10s, the 20s, and the 30s. They're very low on the glycemic index. So they encourage insulin to be more stable. Whereby if you consume foods that are high in the index, and that even includes rices and breads, breads are in the 70s, rices are in the 50s and 60s, oatmeal's in the 50s and 60s, bananas are in the 90s, carrots are in the 80s. These are what we call high glycemic foods. These high glycemic index foods will knock your blood sugar up and then drop you right down, take you up and drop you down. And anything that's processed that doesn't contain fiber will bring your blood sugar way up and then drop you way down. So it's important to balance. And when you look at carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, your whole grains, your rices and your legumes and beans and potatoes, we have an index that goes this way. We go from 0 with those healthy foods, because they're live foods primarily and they're high in fiber, to the complex carbohydrates, which are in the 50s and 60s. Those have to be eaten with proteins and oils to stabilize them.
I see.
So if I took a meat, like a piece of chicken, which is an index of 15 about, and I mix it with a high index food, which is maybe 80, add those 2 indexes together, you get 95. But divide it by 2, you pull the total index, glycemic index, down to 42.5.
I see.
Which makes it readily available to the body. You stabilize your insulin, and you feel great after you eat it. You don't have any drops or rises.
I see. So I find that amazing. You talk about being a super sleuth, but taking the rye out and then it dropping that way. I think that's fascinating. That's interesting. So the insulin went awry. I had to get one in. I mean, my goodness, we were all so serious.
Her insulin went awry. That's so cute. That's very good. It did. It went awry. It went way awry.
All right. What dietary approaches are needed to control diabetes?
Well, the first thing to look at for my diabetic clients is they need to learn how to eat properly. And what is properly? Eating, first of all, 2 times or even 3 times a day if you're diabetic won't cut the ice. I mean,
oh, really?
You need to consume at least feedings like a baby, like I said before, every 3 hours is optimal. And balancing your proteins to fats and carbohydrates. Now, I know that people who watch this show consistently know what a good oil is. This is a good oil. This good oil here comes from flaxseed, sunflower, sesame, pumpkin, and borage oils. These oils are combined into an oil in a bottle.
I think you told us before, never heat this and take about 1 to 2 tablespoons or teaspoons?
Well, it depends how big you are, but I tell most people they can handle, most of the time, I don't care what your size or weight, you can handle 2 teaspoons 3 times a day. Use it raw, drizzle it on your food. Some people like to drink it straight, I don't know why, but drizzle it on your food and it will blend with the food and stabilize insulin. Proteins do the same thing. So your lean fish and your chicken and your turkey and even your organic beefs, buffalo, venison, quail, things like that. All of those red meats are very low in saturated fat and they're high in essential oils. They're exercised. They run around and they fly and they move and they're low in fat. So they're very healthy for you. And then you need to make sure you're consuming fiber in your diet. And Americans, again, we talked in our last show about how no one eats fiber or enough fiber. Everyone's consuming processed foods, so we have very low fiber intake. You need to consume at least 30 grams of fiber a day. Now, may I caution our viewing audience, if you're constipated, don't do that. Not right away. Don't do that.
Okay, don't do that. Okay.
You will have fur balls, and you will be in big trouble. So you need to ease into fiber.
ease into fiber.
You need to bring fiber up slowly, and if you're going to consume more protein and more fiber, you better drink water. Or you have nothing to break those different macronutrient food groups down.
So the animals that exercise and move around more, this is a thing that you should...
The wild gamey animals, yes.
Are good to eat, and that's good.
Very good.
They have the kind of oils in it.
Right. They have
I saw a
the
flying
good
buffalo
essential.
once, but I was drinking a different kind of oil. I don't know what that meant.
Where were you?
Oh, well.
What trip were you on? Yes, buffalo is great.
No
Excellent.
kidding.
He's a Roman boy. He's out roaming around.
Now, tell us something about the avoidance of things. I mean, like, what do you want us not to...
To stay away from?
To stay away from, like...
Saturated fats you should stay away from always, always, always. I mean, you know, your saturated fats can be problematic because it actually impedes the production of many different hormones, and it kind of like, it's like mud in the system. It just mucks things up. And unfortunately, the only fats people get, like I had a new guy who came, our client who came in today, and sweet gentleman, and he showed me his diet, and he was 145 pounds.
I thought you would tell me he showed you your glucose level, and this made him
Well, his glucose was actually very low. His glucose was 68, so he was very low. His cholesterol was very low. His triglycerides were very low. But what we had was a young man who was very, very, very hypoglycemic. I mean, very. And he was 145. His body fat was 10%, and he ate about 2,200 calories a day. But they were all 80% to 90% were carbohydrates. So it's like he was very lean, and when you're lean, you can eat more because you have a faster metabolism generally. So, but he was doing all carbohydrates. He ate like 6 bagels a day. I mean, he had just a bad diet. And I looked at his fat intake, and he was eating Swiss cheese, cream cheese, and he did this, what he called plastic fat, which is a no-fat fat. I'm like, and you're right, it is plastic fat. It's all chemicals and fake fat. So. I told him, I said, what you need to do to stabilize this is to consume more good oils and eat more protein. He was doing maybe 5 ounces of protein a day. He was getting possibly 35 grams of protein a day, and a man at 145 pounds or woman needs about 98 grams of protein a day.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So he was getting half the protein he needed. But if you're not getting protein and you're not getting good oils, you're what? Hungry. Gotta eat. You're like, give me more food. So you're going to eat more food, and the food tends to be carbohydrates, which knocks your blood sugar upside down. And so it's important to know that.
I have some clients that smoke cigarettes, things like that, but they come in and they say, but I take spirulina. I mean, does that help at all? I mean, is it what?
Spirulina is real good. It's a powder that helps to regulate insulin. There are many things that actually help to regulate insulin. Again, fiber sources like oat bran and artichoke flour are wonderful. A tablespoon a day, you know, sprinkled on your food or taken in water would really assist people in regulating insulin production.
Oh, I see.
That would be great. I mean, I have a whole list here, and I'd love to go into this a little bit, but the first thing people need to know is they need to consume 5 to 6 feedings a day at regular intervals, and that would be every 3 to 3.5 or 4 hours. So you are basically eating breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack. And if you're extremely, really low energy in the morning, that means your blood sugar is probably really dropping in the morning, or during the course of the night. So you must eat a high-protein breakfast. Don't skip breakfast,
Don't
folks.
skip breakfast.
You've got to have breakfast. Yeah, that's really, really important.
We got about 5 more minutes. I'd love for you to give us some, finish that up with, some dietary tips.
Okay, good. Lose the coffee. Coffee will knock your insulin levels and your blood sugar all over the place. Not a good idea. No one likes hearing that, but you know what? It's the worst. When you drink coffee, the floodgates open in the body. The pancreas produces tons of insulin because it's been falsely stimulated. So the insulin surges in, rises very high, and then it drops very low. And you need that next cup of coffee to get that insulin surge back up.
I see.
And what you really need is food. So never, ever, ever take, you know, things like spirulina and things like that on an empty stomach. Make sure you always have food present in the gut. Always.
I see.
I would say, what else? High fiber foods, water, fresh fruits and vegetables. Consume at least 3 pieces of fruit a day and at least 4 cups of cooked or steamed vegetables a day, or 8 cups of raw. It's a lot of fiber. That will help to stabilize you too. And you'll lose weight eating that way because you're not doing the doughy foods. And remember, Kurt, the doughy foods make people doughy. And the doughy foods knock your insulin all over the place, or your glycemic index all over the place. That's
I see.
problematic.
Mhm.
Zinc is really good. L-carnitine, amino acids for people like L-carnitine are wonderful. I want to tell people not to take fish oil caps because that raises your blood sugar more often than not. So if anyone's taking EPA oils, lose the EPA oils.
Okay,
that's
that's very
important.
good.
Good to know that. Watch out for B1, B3, and vitamin C. Those 3 nutrients, okay, those supplements, if you take those in high enough doses, will actually raise your blood sugar too.
Oh, I see.
So watch
Okay.
out for vitamin B1, B3, and excessive amounts of vitamin C. And that generally means about 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams a day of C. Cysteine, cysteine, breaks down insulin and makes it less available to the body. So that's another B complex. If you're taking that, lose it. L-carnitine, again, is a stabilizer for insulin. That's a free-form amino acid. It's found in animal meats. Or you can take it as a supplement. Many people take it to burn fat when they're exercising. And I would say take chromium picolinate, at least 400 micrograms a day, and zinc at least 50 to 75 milligrams a day.
I see.
Those will all help.
My goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Did I forget anything? Foods that stabilize your blood sugar: soybeans, your veggies, cheeses, egg yolk, garlic is wonderful.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
I always tell people, for insulin problems or any kind of autoimmune problem, go ahead and take garlic.
Okay.
And make sure you do your essential fatty acids, okay? Ginseng teas lower blood pressure, but don't take ginseng if you have high blood pressure. I mean, will lower your blood sugar, but don't take it if you have high blood pressure.
I see.
It's a
Okay.
problem. And cedar berries and huckleberries and things like that, or huckleberry teas, are all good for regulating insulin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's about it. Let
You
me
got
think.
it all
yeah,
in?
I think
You
so.
sure?
Okay. Yes. That's it. So,
That's so much.
okay,
That's
we've
so
got
much. Yet it's simple. What you're saying to us is eat, but eat right, and eat
Right.
regularly, and eat consistently. And
Right.
stop worrying about skipping meals to lose weight because you're doing the reverse.
Right.
And it just completely alters, you exacerbate things when you do it that way.
Well, and I tell people all the time, you know what, if you get in your car and you drive up your hill, you're using what? Fuel. You're using gasoline. And food to our body is gasoline or fuel. So I have people who don't eat and they go and work out and they have no fuel to burn fat. So you must eat. The problem with most Americans is they A, don't eat enough, and B, they don't eat frequently enough. And what they do eat tends to be empty calorie foods like carbohydrates that are processed.
Well, it looks like the
So-
people are either great dancers out there or they're telling me to wrap it
Okay.
up. But as you know, we could talk forever because there's so much to
Right.
learn. And I know if I'm learning it, you're learning it. So why don't you join me again? This is Kurt Hill with Health Exposure. My goodness, good show.
Good?
Good
Okay.
show. I really
Good.
think it's good.